Today, I want to give you an update on the 1960 versus 1034 KvK, because although the 1034 team had a better opener than I think even they were expecting, 1960 is starting to gain a little bit of steam. So stick around in this video for the things you need to know in how this KvK is progressing and who might be winning. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms. And I want to give you an update on this 8 Imperium KvK, which in my opinion it's just gotta be the biggest KvK of the year. The part of the reason for this is that you've got 1034 against 1960, and the rivalry in Ark of Osiris League was a big deal, but now that they get to smash it out in KvK, they get to take that rivalry to a whole new level. What makes this even more crazy is that it's a 3 versus 5. The 3 war camps in the top versus all 5 other war camps in a Strife of the 8. So the first thing I want to do is review the right-hand side of the map and show you how this has progressed. Because I really do think this is the biggest, I think, area of excitement and progression for the 1034 team and their allies. In this zone, you've got 1671 battling against 2 war camps. And the opening for the zone went really well for 1875 and also 2891, who were able to gain a fair amount of ground. In fact, they have both of these passes blocked off. This is a big deal. It is highly unlikely that the 1875 and 2891 combo would lose these passes before Kingsland opens. Now look, Kingsland is a long time away. There are, I think, literally like 2 weeks or so between the pass openings from coming in through here to going into Kingsland. But securing this pass is absolutely massive. And I think a part of what we can attribute the success to for the 1875-2891 combo is that not only are there 2 Imperiums versus 1, but also I'm hearing that 1671 has a really crazy strong uptime and a very vulnerable downtime. And so although they're gaining ground or pushing well in their uptime, you can tell from this already double backforted situation that they are preparing a defensive, not an offensive. So they are very much on their back foot, making sure they don't get sort of closed into this pass over here, because then you could push through this pass into the other side. So at this point, 1671 kind of needs to hold on for dear life until allies can arrive. Those allies would come from here. GV77 could come all the way through and bring a massive amount of support. So I think it is unlikely we'll see a ton of sort of change here, given that it takes a full day to burn the forward fort, assuming you keep it burning 24/7. And then you can always build fort on a fort on a fort on a fort on a fort, only losing 1 square of territory per time, or per day. So you can really create an impressive defensive if you've got the forts to be able to sort of barricade or block the progress in that way. And it does seem maybe this fort becomes a real area of a vulnerability, which is why 1875 is attacking it literally right now. So that is the right-hand side of the map. A pretty exciting opener if you're on the 1034 side, and a pretty concerning opener if you're on the 1960 side. However, if we flip back over here to the 1960 side of the map, this is where 1960 is in some ways gaining some momentum. In the pass opening, 1034 and their allies, 2268, were able to get a massive amount of ground. You may recall they had a wall jump over here. They had a lot of territory over here. They'd built over the bridge over here. And what is really impressive about the 1034 and their allies and their push is that they had a row of forts sort of back over here, and they pushed that row of forts all the way up to this pass. So although they don't have exclusive control over the pass, they do have a sort of setup here that would be very difficult to remove. So the opener for 1034 and their allies was extremely good. But I checked in with my friend Plotto Gaming, who I've been casting Ark of Osiris League with on the official Rise of Kingdoms channel, and he is playing in 2268. So he is playing as an ally of 1034, and he's fighting in this zone and has been live streaming it. And by the way, if you want to check out his channel, card will be linked, or not a card, I guess the link will be in the description for that. But I chatted with him, and here were his insights based on what's happening from his actually playing this KvK. What he said was that although the 1034 and 2268 group pushed really hard in the field at the pass opening, right now they're sort of kicking back a little bit and saying, hey, if we push that hard until Kingsland opens, we're going to be out of resources and speed ups. And these guys on the other side of the river here, they will not be out of resources and speed ups. You have to kind of assume 1960 is bottomless. And that really is the sort of strategy of 1960. Leverage bottomless resources and speed ups in order to drain your enemy as much as possible before the sort of Kingsland fight happens. And if they can do that, then they're going to be in a very good spot. So for that reason, 2268 and their allies has been surrendering position over here, whereas before they had flags here. They surrendered this land over the bridge because they couldn't port cities into it, and so it was too costly to sustain. So they went to a more sustainable position. And I think the overall tone I was sort of getting is that they're sort of digging in for now the long haul. How do they sustain the level of push they need to prevent meaningful territory change? And we've seen this, by the way, in many KvKs. In the KvK where I was in 1254 versus 365, we saw this in the KvK with 365 versus 1093. At some point, when this fort position is established, it becomes prohibitively time-consuming and difficult to actually meaningfully change the lines. The only thing that you could be vulnerable to is a fort drop, and it is kind of funny that, like, there's some amount of space that 1960 has left open, but I think that illustrates their level of confidence with their ownership of this zone. So 1034 and 2268 hold this defensive position, and then, as I was suggesting, the way things get kind of mixed up is when the Middle Kingdoms step into the fray. Now, the Middle Kingdoms may or may not need to go both ways. Let me explain. I think that for the Middle Kingdom here, 2377 probably should go both ways. They will probably send the majority of their force to support 1671, and they will send probably a smaller contingency to this side. At least that's what I would be thinking about doing. Doesn't look like they're set up yet to do that, but you're always just a fort away. But the reason that you would want to potentially do that, you drop a fort over here, get into this zone, drop a fort over here, get into this zone, and then drop a fort somewhere in here, and then have GT clear a lane for you to come through. The reason you do that is that you think you can actually deliver some meaningful pressure in the time between this pass opening, Pass 6, and Kingsland. Now, if I remember correctly, there's not actually that much time between these pass openings. So if I pull up the calendar that I've got really quickly, I see that I have the pass opening on my restart on 10/12. I've got the pass opening for 6 right over here. This opens on the 16th. And then it's actually the 23rd. If I have it down correctly, the 23rd for Kingsland. So there actually is a lot of time. And that really tells you, okay, so right now it's the 9th, and they've got 2 weeks until Kingsland. So you can see why 1034 and 2268 are now taking a more defensive and passive posture toward their field presence, because you're right, they would get drained. And that is exactly the thing they cannot have happen. So overall, I'm really hyped for this KvK, and it's still a toss-up for who is really winning. I think that 1960 is doing exactly what they need to accomplish in this zone, even though they have less territory than they would like. At least I assume that's the case. And the thing they need to do is just keep on draining these guys for the full 2 weeks. Just drain, 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 drain. However, on the opposite side of the map, this is a more concerning situation. But I do think it is highly likely that 1671 will be able to sort of take the same sort of defensive approach and hold this position until their allies can get here. Now, this means, however, that if the pass situation doesn't change, that means that there will be, let's say, 2 passes currently locked up for 1960 and their allies, and 4 passes locked up for 1034 and their allies. 1 pass is in contention, and I actually have it wrong. This is 5 passes for 1034 and their allies. Oh, man. So 5 for 1034 and their allies, 2 for 1960 with 1 in contention. So even if 1960 scores a big W and locks up this pass, you're still looking at a 3 versus 5 pass situation, which is funny because it is 3 kingdoms versus 5 kingdoms. All Imperium. So what will eventually happen? We're going to have to watch and see. On the left side, it's the burnout and drain of 1034 and their allies that could lead to a meaningful amount of territory change for 1960, although that's unlikely. And on the right side, a massive loss of territory for 1671 would be not exactly disastrous, but not great for 1960 and their allies. As it stands, I think it's just really unlikely they'll ever be able to get to this pass. So given that, at this point, sort of maximum damage has already been inflicted. Unlike in the Orleans KvK where the holy sites are really critical, here we're just talking about these sanctuaries, which are 10% march speed, and all of them do the same thing. So it's not like you have a really critical holy site you have to have. So, I mean, as long as they have one of these sanctuaries, and heck, they could have 0 of the sanctuaries and have territory come in here and claim one of these if they really wanted to. So I don't think there's any meaningful territory loss. If they came into here and started taking the Hurons, then we're talking about some real buff changes, but I think that is so extraordinarily unlikely. If you enjoyed the vid, do me a favor, throw a like on here and consider subscribing. I'll give you a quick update, by the way, on the 1093 KvK. In case you missed my last video summarizing this KvK, when we were sort of last looking in, it seemed like 365 was gaining momentum, and they did in fact take all of Kingsland and are now sort of in that snowball effect of taking all the other territory as well. And that's not to say that 93 isn't defending, but at this point it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, what is the point of defending? Unless you plan to push back in, and I don't think they can. So this KvK, I think, also evolved in a way that I pretty much predicted. I said 1365 was taking it easy in these side zones, and they were. They went hard in Kingsland, and with the help, I will say, to a not small amount of 1818's really impressive punch, they were able to get the job done. So hashtag 1818 for Zig if you're on Team 1818. I don't know if they have enough players to really justify that the way that autark rewards work, but regardless, I'm not going to get into the politics of the rewards here. I'll simply say, if you want to understand how end of KvK rewards work, I'll have a card in the end screen. Alternatively, if you want to see that zone opening for the 1034 1960 KvK, card will be in the end screen for that as well, and it was really crazy.